And we are live, Sales Wisdom Pod, with none other than Daniel Cmejla, my man Dan. He's VP of Community at Apollo, one of my favorite companies that I constantly recommend. Pretty much changed my life, this company. Brought me so much money and leads and everything in between. So yeah, I'm very bullish on the platform. They start at $80 a month. We'll bring you at least 10K contacts per month that you can cold outreach to for sales, for partnerships, for community building, for VC fundraising, anything you can put your mind to, you can do it with this platform. So pretty much a no-brainer. Dan, I'm super stoked to have you on. Can you introduce yourself? Tell us a bit more about yourself and your role at Apollo.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I've been a big fan of your work as well, Charles. My job at Apollo is basically to identify organic user-generated content, basically folks like yourself, and then just try and find authentic ways to partner with them, right? Not like a transactional, you pay me for X and I pay you for Y, although that can happen, but like to truly understand the goals of those you're supporting with your software and support them more broadly. So community at Apollo means PR, customer marketing, events, social media marketing, and community, which is our relationship in these Slack groups, these B2B Slack groups. And I would throw evangelism in there as well. The team's 5, we're going to continue to grow it, but it's been a really exciting 6 months as we basically increased all of our baseline brand metrics, impressions, follower growth, reach, search volume by like 10x or more in under 6 months. So it's been really exciting. And it's just a dream to work with a company that's putting out such high quality product at such a firm end.
Right. Well, I can tell you that I speak to lots of execs and you were like a top pick for Apollo and you have a very odd background. So I want to start with that. You've been in politics and PR for Bernie, PR for Hillary. And that might explain why you're so like this ball of energy and this weird guy that we don't often see in that field. And I think you're having a huge impact for Apollo. So how did they find out about you? Because you did a transition with Chili Piper, which is another big company. But tell us about that past of yours and how it made it who you are today.
Sure. And I could go about this forever. You know, maybe I'm so happy because I'm no longer working in politics, although I still do a little bit of work. Yeah. So my background was originally in door-to-door fundraising, and you learn so much just knocking on a stranger's door. You learn about the nuance of how they react to things. And to skip a bunch of steps, eventually I ended up running Bernie Sanders' persuasion operation in New Hampshire, where we won by the highest margin of any candidate since JFK, actually. So like one thing I've realized throughout my career is that like fundraising, political persuasion, sales, marketing, they're actually all the same skill. They stem from a fundamental understanding of psychology about how people make decisions, about making connections, rapport, momentum, truly seeking to understand those around you. So after I was working in politics, I was the general manager of a community called Modern Sales Pros. I scaled that community from 1,000 to 14,000 members, monetized it, brought in about 2 million sponsorship. And then through that community, I met Christian, who's the VP of product at Apollo. I met most of the other major SaaS leaders of these companies. So I was very lucky after Chili Piper to kind of have the luxury of just reaching out directly to any exec at a B2B SaaS company that I wanted to work at. And I thought really hard about the company I thought was best positioned to win. And I decided that marketers' best friends are not sales, they're product. So I was like, what's the company that's building the best product? I believe it's Apollo, and the results since I joined have been a testament to the strength of the product. Truly a joy to market this product.
Hell of a product. Why do you think it's that good? You know, because I tried Zoom Info before you guys. It was a complete disappointment. Then I found out Apollo was almost love from day one as soon as I plugged SendGrid and I saw the scale potential. I'm a scale guy. Why do you think you guys are so strong on the product level? And also explain about the product in the process.
I feel like you should explain about the product, right? But I'll do my best. You know, there are a bunch of different reasons for this. A lot of it stems from just luck and having the right people, right? Because, you know, I have this belief that VCs both help and ruin software at the same time. It's like, let's say you have a great solution. You raise $10 million for $100 million total addressable market. Then your next funding round, you raise $100 million, but your solution, your TAM isn't large enough. So it forces you to become something you're not. And we see a lot of companies marching along the path to this. Outreach has call recording, Clary has call recording, everybody has AI now. One of the differences is Apollo is basically the only solution out there that decided to build everything ourselves intentionally from the beginning with the goal of it being interconnected. Like the future of go-to-market software is not only the tools, it's how they interact with each other and how they're augmented by AI. So like when we made the decision to do this, it reflected itself in like a plan to do that. And the only way to do that is to invest more heavily in engineering and research and development than anyone else around us. So while other companies were chasing short-term goals, they were throwing CSMs as band-aids on accounts. Our founder, Tim, who's just amazing, was just constantly saying, how do we solve this problem with product? How do we solve this with product? How do we support more people with product? And you do have to wade through some pain to solve things with product, because sometimes it's easier to just throw a person at the solution. But the decision to not do that, combined with our PLG motion, has basically made it so that we can be a product first company, investing primarily in building the best engineering and product team, with sales and go-to-market mechanisms being a secondary effort that's lifted by just having the best product.
Right. And I want to talk how you get folks like me that are already somewhat satisfied with the product to be hyper promoters, because my feeling on it is I'm getting organic value from the product. But if you guys scratch my back even more, then I'll just scratch yours. It's like a natural reaction. It's a natural win-win. So how do you take someone that's already 8 on 10 satisfied with a product and make him a 9 on 10 in your role?
That's a really good question. There are a bunch of different ways to do this, but I'm really heavily influenced by the work of Robert Cialdini, who wrote this book, Influence, about the principles of persuasion. So what he believes is that people at a psychological level are predisposed to certain emotional and psychological tendencies. And one of these is reciprocity. And it makes sense. Like when there was a genetic bottleneck for humans and throughout our evolution, if you don't know how to give back to those who give to you, you probably didn't pass on your genes, right? You straight up died. So it's like a lot of these principles are just hard driven into human consciousness. Like if I were to say, Charles, you're great, you might say, no, you're great. And it seems like a small thing, but it's actually a super real thing. So what I like to think about is like when someone's advocating for you, that's the first point, just along a journey. So you identify that organic evangelism, and then you build processes to steward that to greater levels of evangelism. A lot of people think it's interesting, like, oh, this person's already doing so much, I don't want to ask more. But the psychology would actually say that if you're not continually asking more of your partners, eventually they'll get bored, which is like, wait, so does it ever end? Are we constantly just chasing deeper levels of engagement with each other? I'd say that, we kind of are. So for you, for example, Charles, I'd say like, here's what you're doing now. I would look at your programs. I'd say, what are your goals? Like you want to build more of a brand in X area. How do Apollo's goals overlap with those goals? And then I would say, hey, here's another potential angle for our partnership. But a lot of it comes from like trusting your partners to do things. Rather than being prescriptive, ask them, like, what would you like to do? How can we support you? I mean, Apollo has millions of users. There are definitely ways we can support our best advocates. And sometimes just asking them is a far better path to partnership than being prescriptive.
Love it, dude. We both share that Robert influencer slash mindset guy's mentality. That I can see that in both of us. I fully agree also with the relationship. It always needs to get stronger and better. That's why I'm always fighting with my wife. So, I mean, yeah, that's straight up, like else we get in that comfort zone and we just like stagnate and don't get anywhere. And yeah, it's not like always fighting. It's like 20% of the relationship should be about, having these discussion and talking about things. Definitely agree with that. On the community aspect side of things, for example, Apollo, there's no like Facebook groups or, a lot of people use Cool nowadays, where all Apollo users can discuss with one another. You have probably better things on your roadmap on the short term. What are these things? What are the next big steps that we talked about, you and I, last time, that you have on your roadmap?
Yeah, so kind of to understand the roadmap, I want to give a super brief view of the last 6 months. When I joined Apollo, we had this incredible brand with a lot of love, but we weren't validating that love for folks. So like community to me is a space, either physical or digital, where people who aren't explicitly paid to do so freely exchange knowledge. So the first step when you're building out a community is like, where should you build this community? Where is influencing your buyers right now? Is it Slack groups? Is it LinkedIn? Is it events? Is it whatever? So the very first thing we did, we came in is we were like, we have a strong community in LinkedIn, a community that we're ignoring. So Lee, who runs social at Apollo, and I've worked with in a past role as well, is just brilliant. We ensure that everyone who we could comment on their posts, whenever they gave us love, we would give love back to them. And that creates this like Pavlovian feedback loop. That's the start of things, right? So phase one is like not ignoring people in spaces they exist. Phase two has been moving from one to many marketing channels. So like, you're not just telling your story alone. You have 50 customers telling it. You have 50 employees telling it. You have 25 community partners telling it. Some of this is placed. Some of it happens organically because you reinforce it when it happens. And now to your question, where we're at now, the third phase. Phase 1 and 2, in the last 5 months, we've added about 41% of our total LinkedIn following of all time. We've increased impressions about 900%. Evangelism, much more. I don't really know how to track that. But the third phase is creating spaces where people can exchange and exchange value and have community. So this means we're going to be launching a series of Slack groups. Caroline Maloney is going to be managing one for a lot of the best reps and their frontline managers. And then Zoe Hartsfield is going to be running one for founders. So the plan is to grow that to about 5,000 over the next, about 7,500 by the end of the year. And one of the things that we're tackling right now is like, how do you grow the size of a community while retaining the exclusivity of a community? So there are a lot of interesting questions we're asking ourselves alongside that right now too.
You often talk about not being able to track evangelism. Is that by definition, or is that something we can track to the dark funnel side of things? We've seen these apps yet lately that have been specializing into that. Because, for example, as I think of Apollo, I'm constantly referring it to my own clients. I never thought of tracking that. They probably referred it to other clients, So how do you calculate that super spread, for example?
Yeah, so this is like the ultimate question for community and social media marketers. And honestly, it's been the secret to the success that I've been fortunate enough to experience with an incredible team at the last couple companies I've been at as well. Because not all of this is trackable, but if you can invest into those spaces that aren't trackable, other people might not feel comfortable investing there because they need that hard ROI. There are tools like Octopost or Hockey Stack or whatever that help illuminate the dark funnel a little bit, but it's my belief that we'll never be able to fully illuminate it. So what I like to do is track as much as I can, but also evangelize strongly within the org that we're not tracking everything. A great example is in the last 5 months, we have about 90,000 closed won associated with these UTM links we plaster across social. I've got one on my own company page. It says, Dan sent you here. We put one on our CEO's page. We got one on our company LinkedIn page. And then when someone's like, wow, 90,000 closed won from organic social, we're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What percentage of people do you think are actually going and clicking on these UTMs, right? Maybe it's 1%, maybe it's 10%. That means we're looking at, 10 million, like 1 million to 10 million closed won, not 82,000, right? So that's one way you can look at it, track as much as you can, but then try and figure out what percentage are you not tracking. Another really simple thing you could do is just put a drop down on your demo form that says, how'd you hear about us? Leave it open. A lot of people resist this for a bunch of reasons, one of which is they want to take credit for things. Another is that each form field generally drops conversion rate by like 5%. So that's a legit thing. Another thing you could do is you could just look at like referring website traffic. So you could look at anything that came from LinkedIn and then scrub paid ads from it. It's another way you can do it. You could do events and then look at like the multi-touch impact of those who attended the events over the month after the event. There are a bunch of different ways you can do it. But another thing you could do is just like get snapshots. Like we had a day where our VP of product joined. His name's Akash. He's amazing. He's like a mega product-led growth leader. He's also a pleasure to work with. And he makes this announcement, say, I joined Apollo, massive reach on Twitter and on LinkedIn. So I'm like, hey, can we check to see if there's a spike in web traffic on this day? Yes, there's a spike in web traffic. Like these little nuggets together help build the case to your executive team that what you're doing in organic social is actually working, allows you to get buy-in for more budget and things like that. Ultimately, if you're doing it right, it should show up as people directly requesting demos in your community or evangelism team, referring those to the correct AE, or it should show up as direct inbound traffic or search volume or like just web traffic. One other area it shows up a lot is people clicking on your branded terms, right? So if I were to make a post about how Apollo is great and everyone goes to search apollo.io and then they see ads from all of our competitors trying to attack us, but they click on the Apollo one instead, that's going to show up historically as like demand gen, right? Oh, our ads are working. But what caused someone to Google Apollo in the first place? That's the question. You ask these questions a lot and publicly. Generally, if that's accompanied by other success, you'll begin to get buy-in from executives about investing into the things that you can't really track. Sorry for the novel there, Charles.
That was good. Information entering my brain at a rapid rate, good insights, love it. And I'm thinking, yeah, of Google Ads right now. For example, Charles Cormier, people that search a pod and so forth. Another thing that got me pay more attention to Dan was his post on LinkedIn. I called him spicy, just like your last company, Chili Piper. What's the equilibrium between too much spice and not enough spice? For example, you often talk about ZoomInfo, and me, I'm like, yeah, let's join Dan on that fight because I don't like them either. What's the equilibrium there between causing too much fire in one's brain and not causing anything and not having any engagement?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I don't really know the answer, but what I've been doing seems to be working. In terms of like the spice you're referring to, I try to like write things that are meaningful and help people, but also to like be controversial. And straight up, like ZoomInfo is just low hanging fruit right now. They're a company that has like $1 billion in revenue and they sue their own customers and they have these crazy auto renew clauses in there and they're overpriced. So it's like they've done a very good job at defining the market. Hey, we're supposed to be the leading all-inclusive SaaS tool that does everything. They've done it through a series of acquisitions. And it's like, it just becomes very easy to frame Apollo in the context of like, we can do all this, but way better at a way cheaper level. In terms of spiciness, here's the rule of thumb. And I've learned from mistakes because while at Chili Piper at one point, I did this competitive campaign against Lean Data, who's a Chili Piper competitor, where we took their big event and you couldn't reach their event in San Francisco without walking by these signs that said, vote Chili Piper for your tech stack. And then I took it a step further where I like went into the event space and set some signs up. And it was a mistake. I have since had a long conversation with the CEO of Lean Data and then also their VP of partnerships, Don Otvos, who I love, about how that made people feel. But the rule of thumb I have with competitive positioning is never punch down, right? Like you never want to be that person who punches down at a smaller competitor. I think that's part of the reason why the stuff we've been doing has been effective against ZoomInfo. At first, when I was doing it, they would try to like clap back, but it made them look really bad. Like, why is this billion revenue company attacking a startup? Probably because they're threatened by it. Then I made a post about like how they shouldn't actually be replying to kind of dunk on them, which probably wasn't the best because then they stopped replying. So that strategy stopped working as well. So in general, with the spiciness, I would say that like, if you're a little outside your comfort zone, but you believe what you're saying is true, then there's an opportunity for it. In terms of Apollo, it's just like a perfect storm for ZoomInfo. We're taking so much of their business and like that is just compounding upon itself. So yeah, each of those posts, I generate thousands, tens of thousands of pipeline. You know, I get, 6 to a dozen intro requests after each post. So like, I can't stop doing that. Like it's one of the most effective things that I do on LinkedIn in terms of meaningfully driving forward Apollo's goals. And these aren't like small companies. These are some cases public companies with 1,000+ employees who reach out. Hey, wow, 30% off ZoomInfo. I happen to be a person who does not like ZoomInfo right now. One of the problems if you sell on base as much as ZoomInfo does, you're in a perpetual sales cycle. You sign an $80,000 deal and then you get hit up the next day. And that's just like a very poor buyer experience that that ZoomInfo's competitors are taking them out on, because we can be more authentic and real. Also, they're just way overpriced.
Yep. Apollo is definitely an underdog and a pit bull. I think you guys are going to win. It's not because I like you most, just like pure facts and truisms, which is me, Charles. I go for that always.
Love
Last
it.
question. You're recruiting amazing people on your team. How do you get them through the door, and how do you keep them performant?
This is a really good question, and one I feel a little bit of imposter syndrome about, because it's like I'm very imperfect as a human, but I tend to get feedback that I'm a pretty good manager. And one of the things that I would say is that like treating people with dignity and respect is like a lasting asset that grows, because your former employees will tell people the truth. And this is the opposite as well. Like if you're sexist, if you're like not respecting your employees' work-life balance, that gets out as well. And you'll have a reputation as a bad manager. So, I mean, it's like, who wouldn't want to join Apollo right now? We're like one of the fastest growing SaaS companies in B2B, like so well positioned with this incredible leadership. Tim at the helm, Shake, our chief product officer, coming over after being one of the chief product officers at Qualtrics. It's just like, it's kind of like a great place to be if folks want to advance their career meaningfully. And then the second thing I would say is like creating psychological safety, even in the interview process, that you're going to honor the uniqueness of those around you and really empower them. Like if you, like we'll get 1,000 people will apply for any role I'll post to the community team, or at least a few hundred. So it's like, you're not going to hire people who don't know how to do their job. Like you're not going to hire people who are bad. Then the question becomes like, how do you convince people who are already really good that you'll level them up? And I think that comes from humility, but also from like being like, I'm going to level you up because I'm going to ask you how you want to be leveled up, and then we'll build a plan for it together. And that starts as early as the interview process. In some cases, changing the nature of the job description so that folks feel like they're truly being listened to. And then once they're through the door, like listen to them, ensure they get credit for their work, cultivate psychological safety so they can make mistakes, spend a ton of time with them onboarding to unlock them, and then like listen, just listen to them all. So I don't know, there are a bunch of different ways. I'm still not sure how I got so lucky to have such an incredible team, but I try to just be genuinely excited about their wins, which I don't have to try for at all, actually. And that's a big part of it.
My man, 5 months left to the year. What's next for you?
We're going to just blow up so much. You know,
Oh,
I
yeah.
said we got like a 900% increase in my first 5 months. Let's do it again. Another 900% increase on top of that. So I think we're going to get there with evangelism and customer marketing. Like if you look now online, we don't tell people like, hey, comment on this, but like people will post and they'll get like 2-3 likes or whatever. And then they'll post about Apollo versus ZoomInfo and they'll get like 600 likes. Like there is an army of impassioned Apollo supporters that I know all I have to do is find out what they want and how I can support them, and the rest will happen really nicely and organically. So over the next 5 months, you're going to see a field marketing effort, us properly going to events. We've got a big booth at HubSpot that's coming up. You'll see a renewed focus on community, building our own communities, and you'll see a massive uplift in employee and partner evangelism. And it's just going to be amazing. The idea is that we run a series of experiments, find ROI on them, and then scale those programs. So I'd like a lot of people within the Apollo team to become people managers over the next 5 months as well.
To the moon. Where can people find out more about you then?
LinkedIn. My URL is LinkedIn/great marketing. And they can find out from you too, Charles, right? Like you're the ultimate Apollo evangelist. So I would say follow Charles if you want to just see it all put into action. Sorry, I didn't ask you any questions here. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to. You kept me on my toes.